Well, welcome to TasFarmers Talks. Good to be back. It's been a busy fortnight as always. Let's go around the table and introduce who we have on the lineup today. Policy Officer Extraordinaire, Jonathan. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Grayson. And extraordinaire is a bit of a stretch, but glad to be here.
Oh, we all across everything. So high expectations for you today. And Mr. President, Nathan Cox, welcome back.
Thank you, Grayson.
What's been happening? Anything exciting?
Lots of things happening, lots of things that we'll discuss today that are really important for farmers, and can't wait to get our teeth into it today, I don't think.
Has it stopped raining on the northwest?
It's eased off.
It's eased off.
That's as much as I can guarantee.
That means it's just falling off the trees now?
No, it's still coming out of the sky. The falling off the trees will come.
Well, and welcome to Neil Gross, our own Renaissance man, book writer, fisherman,
Angler.
policy guru as well, angler.
Thank you for all of that.
I
thought I got the sack. I haven't been here for a while.
Well, we keep the best till last.
Was this the last one?
No.
Is this something you're
It's
not
your
telling
last
us?
appearance, maybe. No, you'll be back. Look, this episode we want to talk, as you've alluded to, Mr. Cox, dairy effluent is being classified as trade waste, causing some issues. The Invasive Species Council has released some new economic information and modelling which shows wild deer could be costing us up to $1.4 billion over 30 years. And we're opening the pot in terms of poker on potato negotiations. But before we do, there's been just a little bit of movement in the state's politics with a few resignations. John O'Donoghue in federal Parliament, quite a surprise, Neil.
Yeah, big loss that to
Big loss.
to the Senate team in general nationally. Like John O has a huge grasp on policy and what it means for places like Tasmania. He's very articulate. He understands the big issues. He's extraordinarily well connected, but it just unfortunately shows the toll that is taken by politicians with young families. Like when you're a senator, you are literally away 26 weeks of the year. And the 26 weeks of the year that you're at home, you're rarely at home. So, it's a shame. It's a great loss for Tasmania and for, one would hope, a good opposition in time.
And called a safe pair of hands for the coalition, and was certainly starting to make an impact and was perhaps influential in the leadership change. More locally, though, we've also seen the resignation of Madeleine Ogilvie and now Jane Howlett in the last 24 hours. What's going on in state parliament?
Oh, can we actually focus on what Tasmania needs to get done?
That would be nice.
So what I'm concerned about with all this going on is, as far as agricultural advocacy goes, we've found ourselves in a period of a bit of stability with Gavin as Ag Minister, and even with Janie as opposition Ag spokesman. We're actually getting things done. We're getting to the point where agriculture is climbing back up the leaderboard as far as priorities. All this instability just gets people to take their eye off the ball, and any advocacy from any industry is going to lose traction, and that just needs to stop. The instability needs to be sorted out so we can get back on with the business of trying to do the best we can for all our industries, not just agriculture, but in our case, agriculture in particular.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Like, you think about Parliament this week will be dominated by, resignations, but also today I think there's a censure motion on the cards, and they'll be talking a lot about themselves again. When we talk about important advocacy issues that we're trying to get up, all the oxygen and all the capacity for government to listen to what we're going to say is gone. So, there's any amount of issues we're trying to get government to take account of, but they're just not going to listen to us while all this other self-indulgent stuff's going on.
And I hear the lawyers' fees are for defence against the Integrity Commission, State's Integrity Commission.
It's really interesting that the state taxpayer, all of us and everyone else is working their backsides off, we're actually funding both sides of it. So we're funding the prosecution and the defence. Now, that's just, I don't know, just everyone would shake their head and go, how the hell can we just burn $1 million? And we think about the projects that we run in here, like, our really successful drought resilience project, which we ran over 2 years, which cost a couple of $100,000. And all of a sudden there's $1 million gone in legal fees for something that no one actually understands, when we could actually be doing something really constructive with money like that.
That's a fair point, Neil. We have to fight tooth and nail for every dollar, for every project that builds productivity and efficiency and profitability in agriculture. And like you say, then you see just a great big bucket full of money being thrown out the window.
Well, it does sound like effluent. So talking of effluent, let's get to our first topic. And Jono, this is probably your area of expertise, not the effluent bit, but the dairy part. Effluent's one of those topics that rarely grabs headlines in this manner, but it's critically important to the farming productivity and environmental outcomes. Can you tell us what the controversy is all about at the moment in dairy and use of dairy effluent?
There's a few layers to it, Grayson, and we've been dealing with it for a little while now. And as Jeff was saying, we had a dairy committee meeting yesterday. He brought it up that when we do hear feedback from our members, it's usually of importance, and this is something that we've heard for probably the last 3 or 4 months, just keeps coming up, and it's been something that we've been trying to deal with, working with ministers, working with industry, but basically it just lies down with a bit of a worry around dual regulation. So there's the CBOS issue, which Nathan, you obviously are well across as well, and it's just there's the threatening sort of landscape where we could have CBOS and TDIA regulating effluent on farm, and it falls under two quite different ways of regulating it, which just increases costs, and we've seen the cost of compliance just skyrocket recently, and we just need to be careful with how we go about it and who deals with it. And I think, Nathan, you can probably add on to it a little bit more, but aside from that, it's also just the way that it's being regulated at the moment, and the way that farmers are sort of getting their feedback, and the way that they need to respond to that in a timely manner. We know that effluent's important, but it needs to be appropriate, and it needs to be proportionate to the system they're running as well.
Because I'm not a man of acronyms, what was CBUS?
Construction, building and occupational services. They're there to oversee the construction and civil construction industries and what goes on there. They have a part to play in trade and industrial waste. But as we all know, dairy effluent is a waste product that's generated by dairy cows. This also would pick up on waste generated in feedlots and other agricultural enterprises. But to a farmer and to the agriculture industry, what a cow generates is not waste, it's a resource. If it's generated in the paddock, it goes back in as nutrient movement from being grass through the cow, which ends up as meat or milk, and then comes back out of the cow's fertiliser. In a dairy situation, a lot of effluent is generated in the dairy yard. It gets collected and put back out onto dairy farmers' property as a really cost-effective resource that offsets a huge amount of imported fertiliser.
It seems appropriate to be reusing that from an environmental aspect, and also in today's world of urea and other fertiliser costs going through the roof. If my reading's right, the CBUS legislation that governs that was developed in 2016. How does red tape suddenly flower at least a decade later? What have I missed? What did someone wake up one day and went, oh, hang on a minute?
Well, and sometimes this legislation is driven by ideology and those seeking to enforce it. So you might have someone who has really strong views around effluent and how that should be contained and how that should be prevented from getting into waterways, and then takes it to an impractical level. And I suspect that's what we're finding here, where particularly in local government, someone has decided there's a crusade to be fought here, and farmers, as usual, are at the wrong end of bureaucratic crusades.
So what's the practical implication here, Jono, of moving what is now classified as industrial waste, dairy effluent, around the farm. What are they saying? You can't use it now, or
So there's, I mean, the biggest issue at the moment is the fact that if you're down to the letter of the law, you're not allowed to spread it further than your dairy title, which is where your dairy is placed on. And we obviously know that in Tassie, farmers have multiple titles on their properties, and if they can't spread it out to the paddocks that they actually need it on, or even just the systems that they use, it's causing huge issues and a lot of stress and anxiety within the farming community. So first and foremost, I think what our dairy committee wanted to see was it not classified as trade waste, but actually a resource, because at the end of the day, it's an interpretation of these regulations that classifies it as trade waste. And if we can find a way to move that into a resource category, it would change everything on farm. It would change the way it's regulated and sort of just open up a place that farmers need to be able to access their effluent, which...
So that idea of the waste needing to be retained on the title that it was generated on works in, say, Invermay, where someone has a workshop where they generate waste. You don't want it to get onto the next door neighbour's property. That's completely understandable. Where you've got adjoining titles that all do the same thing in an agricultural sense, to retain all that nutrient on one title and to spread it only on the title will give you huge environmental outcomes with the huge amount of nutrient transfer to that title.
Negative outcomes.
Negative outcomes. And you'll also end up with animal welfare issues because of that nutrient build-up from that nutrient transfer. I think that it's simply a misinterpretation and a lack of understanding on the part of whoever the individual or the group is that have decided to do this. I know that dairy farms have spent a fortune on effluent systems. I know that's one of your next questions.
It is. What's involved in an effluent system? Is there a storage tank and then it's pumped?
So it varies. So you've got storage dams, storage tanks. There's always a system for getting the effluent away from the dairy yard into a storage tank or dam. It's quite often a 2-dam system where solids are kept and then liquids can be pumped out. They could have separators, which are really expensive industrial pieces of equipment. And then the liquids are then pumped out through irrigators. And some of those irrigators are the smaller transportable ones that we see around the place, but some of them are the bigger centre pivots and linears that are set up to put that effluent on, and they run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for each machine. And farmers have set those up on other titles to be able to spread that nutrient back over to where it was first harvested. They will now, under the CBOS regime, not be able to send it like that. And I mean, I've had that refuted by people that are involved, but for the farmers that are actually trying to do that and trying to set up new systems, they are being knocked back on that.
So new systems, I mean, that's a bit of breaking news. You're telling us that after 10 years of the legislation, they've suddenly decided to start knocking back the installation of these systems and networks.
Well, this is under the CBOS regime, and CBOS haven't been involved up until the last 3 or 4 months.
So what precedent they have no precedent, obviously, for the last 10 years with the legislation being in place. It's just a magic wave of the wand here and maybe a bit of ideology.
So who's involving CBOS? So they obviously haven't woke up one day and gone, you know what, let's go down this rabbit hole. Is this local government, which has a role to play in that? Is it local government and, particular local governments that are pursuing this, do you think?
It would appear that it's local governments. And what that does is once a local government goes down that path, what we've had in the past are installers and designers of effluent systems that have built systems that have worked for the last 20, 30 years with no issues whatsoever. Now they're effectively considered not competent. And so their businesses will be wound up at a pen stroke. And so now we as agriculturalists, if we're generating this sort of waste from our enterprise, have to go through civil engineers who don't understand dairy farms or agricultural enterprises and cost a lot more. And their systems will be more complicated, more expensive, and achieve the same thing or possibly less depending on what they come up with.
I reckon you could talk for an hour on the things holding back agriculture at the moment and have a different one every 30 seconds and not draw breath and not say the same thing twice.
There are some serious headwinds.
It's, yeah.
So we really are forgetting that this is not necessarily a waste product. It's a resource, isn't it? That's what we're arguing.
And if it's managed effectively on farm, and so the TDIA are the ones that regulate it within Tasmania, and they've done a great job, but it's just really hard sometimes when it comes down to risk. And if there's no risk attached to those audits, then farmers are having to abide by the exact specifications that the regulations state. But for example, if you bring on an extra 50 cattle onto your property, and all of a sudden that sort of tips over your system, then you're going to have to go back and get a redesign from either a consultancy firm such as Pinion. That costs money, and then it just bounces back and forth. So TDIA have actually stated to us that farmers need to be talking to their advisor, whether that is Pinion or someone else, and just making sure that they're stipulating exactly what needs to be in that new design so that they don't have to go back and repay advisory firms to continue this development of an effluent system.
Because it's worth pointing out that the nature of dairy farms in Tasmania is they're usually a conglomeration of older, smaller dairy farmers. So, I know where my grandfather's dairy farm was in Wellborough, that was 7 titles, and now it's part of probably a 30-title dairy farm, much bigger. So it's not going to be isolated to any one particular part of Tasmania. It's a massive issue, and then it flows on into other sectors as well.
So there's not just one regulating body, there's 2 regulating bodies. It's now stopping new investment, and it's impacting existing infrastructure. I mean, have I summed that up, or have I missed something important here of why we would need this much red tape?
No, it's spot on. And I think there's a massive opportunity if farmers can have the ability to use it effectively on their farm, but we just need to cross that boundary and make sure that they can have access to it.
So what we'd hope for is for councils that have gone down this path to recognise the error of their ways and to unplug the decision. I think that's the nicest way of putting it. To walk back the decision, to go back to where they were, with TDIA doing the regulation of it, using the consultants and the designers that their stuff has worked for 20, 30 years, and to leave the people out of it that don't know what they're on about and will just cause it to be more complicated and more expensive. And that's our advocacy position pretty much.
Okay, so there's 3 potential government entities involved: local council, TDI, and CBUS.
And the EPA.
And the EPA. I mean, it's just getting easier
that-
here, Neil.
No show without punch.
That's right. So they'd be tucked in the back there somewhere as the overarching body. But I think if TDIA were to continue to regulate the way they had done, you could forecast which way they were going to go. You understood what their expectations were, and then we throw another body in that doesn't understand agriculture at all, and that's obvious from the way their stuff's written. I just think we've got to revert back to where it was. If it needs to be tightened for some reason, make a good case for tightening it, but it's worked.
So if it's an important resource, the effluent, what's the real impact on the ground, Nathan, in terms of improving nutrient use and reducing fertiliser costs?
Use it wisely. Put it out over the paddocks, not too much in one spot. Don't concentrate it.
Does it have a big impact in offsetting having to then go off farm and purchasing fertiliser?
Absolutely. Every ton of that, every ton of reuse that you can put back on your paddock, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's going to reduce your reliance on fertiliser coming through the farm gate. So that's artificial fert like urea and others. It will reduce how much you need. You still need to do it, but it takes the pressure off the ordering system and off your wallet.
And it just meets the government targets and the circular economy that we're trying to extend into the community and bring farmers up to speed with. And I think if you can just use a resource that technically shouldn't be waste but is classified as waste as a resource, then we're solving a few things at once.
For farmers, waste builds up true waste builds up really fast on farms. So things like bulk bags, baling twine, That's
silage wrap.
silage wrap, baling twine, whether it's waste product or a resource.
No,
depends
that's
on,
a resource. You can build cities out of baling twine.
You can tie a lot down with a bit of baling twine.
hold your world together with baling twine. But we're very aware of waste and rubbish around our farms, and there always seems to be generated through bulk bags and silage wrap and other things. We don't want it on our farms. We're always trying to find ways to reduce that sort of waste. But where we've got a resource that we can use, don't overregulate us. Don't throw us under the bus on it, because, like you said, the circular economy, it's really important to us. It saves us money and makes us profitable.
And that's a very environmental approach to it.
Oh, gold medal stuff.
No, Neil, is there any movement on the silage wrap fiasco of being able to dispose of it and recycling?
Not as I'm aware. And again, this is a classic example of everyone's attention in decision-making bodies being taken away through, navel gazing in Parliament. Like, everyone's addressing how that works in there, and then nothing else being going on. So, yeah, I'm not sure where we're at. I don't think there's been any screaming from the headlines around government having addressed the issue and solved it.
Well, from managing nutrients on farm to managing those invasive pesky species.
Our much prized and vaunted deer.
The prized deer, depending on where you sit. Government announced massive reforms. It's been a month or so now. We've welcomed those changes. But we have just seen really what the cost is here from the Invasive Species Council, giving us an idea that it's costing $1.4 billion over 30 years if the current managed settings don't change. Feral deer are probably costing the Midlands area and eastern regions more than $53 million a year, according to that report. Without stronger intervention, annual costs could rise to almost $300 million a year by 2054. And deer numbers are expected to increase from today's 71,000 to more than 666,000 by 2054.
666, isn't that the devil's number?
Well, it's a pretty big number, 667. We've missed the 16. But there's a lot of issues there, and it's going to cost, in terms of productivity, crop and pasture damage. There'd be forestry impacts. The old deer hitting the front of the car. They're not small beasts. There's a lot of economic impacts. Has the government gone far enough? We've asked that question before. A month on, how are farmers feeling, Nathan, about these reforms?
Still waiting to see the detail. We know that the broad scope of the reforms that were announced by the minister, the reduction in permits and the opening up for more ground for hunters. We still think there's a win there for everyone. Hunters will get more ground. Farmers will get more opportunity to remove deer. The Invasive Species Council numbers are really interesting. We know from some work that was done a few years ago that the net economic benefit to Tasmania for sporting shooters was about $80 million a year. Fair chunk of that would be deer, gear and equipment and money spent on those hobbies, and some people it's more than the hobby, it's a lifestyle of chasing deer. That seems to be being well offset to the net Tasmanian economy by the damage deer are doing. So it won't be long and that $80 million will be equalled by the amount of damage that deer are doing just on the Midlands, on the East Coast and in the Midlands, if we don't get on top of it. I'm not criticising anyone for having a hobby. It's just that hobby can't be costing other people.
When do we actually think numbers will start declining? Today we're seeing videos of large mobs moving across property. They're not small, and not just one or two, but 3 or 4, 5 mobs. Huge numbers.
There could be hundreds in each mob.
I haven't seen any modelling on any sort of population decline forecasts. Hopefully someone's doing that, but I would like to see that done so that we can say in so many years the pressure's off the East Coast, the pressure's off the Zone 2 properties, but I just haven't seen that.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but populations won't decrease until we address the current issue, and all the numbers say that it's going the other way.
It is. We need to effectively, bluntly, just shoot a lot more, and to maintain any population, we need to be shooting somewhere between 34 and 35% every year, and 35% of 70,000. That's a lot of deer.
That's a huge amount of deer.
If we don't get that sort of number under control every year, we will see that 600 plus thousand by 2050. And it's a brutal reality of protecting our agricultural landscape. It's a brutal reality of protecting a lot of our natural environmental assets and values that are out there that we're world class for. So Walls of Jerusalem and the Ben Lomond National Park area. And if we don't get these things under control, we're just going to see those almost ruined.
So current shooting practices clearly aren't working. And we were all talking to one prominent farmer the other day who is going to the extremes of fencing them out at an extraordinary cost to him and his business. If you extrapolate that and we start fencing deer out of productive farmland, then there's more deer inside those sensitive natural areas, which are either state forest or national parks or reserves. Then the government will have to act to protect that, surely. So can they not see that that is just going to be an exponentially higher cost of acting, 5 years down the track when farmers suddenly decide we've got to fence these darn things out?
So there'll be farmers that can afford to fence them out, and there's farmers that can't for one reason or another. The farmers that can afford to fence them out, they'll just displace them onto farmers that can't afford it. And with the damage that will occur because of those increased populations, they'll be less able to afford to fence them out.
And that'll push them closer to suburban areas, highways, main roads.
Yep.
Already seen a few dangling in the Prospect area near the southern outlet into Launceston, which is a little bit alarming because that is very close to a heavily populated area, and I imagine the damage that beast did was significant. Jono, what are farmers telling you still about deer? Are you still hearing anything?
Just the same old, I think, Grayson. It's always another recurring theme that we see around here is pest management, and deer is a big one. And we're in for a world of hurt if those numbers get up to 660,000 by 2054. So I'm not sure if we need to start looking at other management practices, if there is any, or if we need to start thinking about really trying to ramp things up, because like Neil and Nathan said, we're in, dire straits if this just continues the way it is.
The big issue for me is deer isn't our number one problem. Deer is not even close to being our number one browsing pest issue. The number one browsing pest issue in this state is wallaby. And if you think deer are out of control, wallaby is on another level altogether.
I've never seen, I live on the West Tamar, I've never seen so many wallabies in my life as what I'm seeing now. So we've lived on there for 20 odd years. We're a semi-rural block, we've got 15 acres. I have not mowed my lawn for 2 years, which is great. But the number of wallabies, and it's transitioned from small paddy melons, little stinkies, to now when I drove up my driveway last night, 7 o'clock last night, the driveway was full of Bennett's wallabies that were 3 feet high. Like, I don't know where they're coming from, but man alive, there's some game out there.
The balance is out of whack. It shouldn't be getting this out of hand, especially with wallabies and deer, and obviously with agricultural land and the productivity that we're finding in our pastures. We are unfortunately on that side of things feeding them more, and it's just the numbers are just blowing out of proportion.
And wild animals will always do what wild animals do, which is go where the food is. I know the old trout fishing adage is find the food and you'll find the fish. Well, we're just feeding these things like nobody's business because we're being encouraged to be more productive as farmers, which we should be. We have these lofty goals of $50 billion by 2050 or whatever it is. Sorry, Grayson, I can't remember.
10 billion.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And we do that by being more productive. We are the most innovative and productive cohort of farmers probably in the country, yet we're continually penalised by browsing animals we don't have the tools to control properly, by regulations around effluent, by regulations around farm dam safety assessments, by you name it, where even, talking to one member yesterday, they've got fully registered side-by-sides and farm bikes, but they can't take them out on the road outside their farm because they're not allowed to have them on a road over 80 kilometres an hour. You think, the world's gone mad. How are we, this has to stop. We have to reverse this trend of just over-regulation and just stupidity.
I don't know who thinks a lot of this stuff up, but there's a tree somewhere creating the oxygen for them, and they need to go and find it and apologise.
Well, if we could get a feather duster out and wave it round, what would you like to see happen next in that space? And in a bigger sense, with, as Jonathan says, the wallaby population exploding and the amount of deer that just keep popping up.
I'd just like to see more urgency, particularly with wallaby. I think there's opportunity for some urgency around changing the tools that we've got. We've had opportunity for different poisons that aren't 1080 for wallaby.
We've never said 1080 on deer, though, have we? To be clear,
no, that is, and I know there's a lot of people on social media that say, "Oh, farmers just want to use 1080 on deer." That has never ever been our position. That's not going to be our position. But as far as wallabies go, there are just too many, and we do need some urgency on it. Whether that's firearms, whether it's assistance with affording fencing, and I just think bureaucrats and people that sit in focus groups or meetings around the place that like fluffy, cuddly animals don't have to pay for the damage that they cause. And when you do, you have a very different perspective on your little fluffy animals. Not to say we don't like them, we don't like them eating our grass.
Yeah, and I mean, there's got to be a lot of different tools we can use. I mean, even the federal government could come to play with, making all fencing for keeping out browsing wildlife becomes an instant asset write-off, whether it's $5,000 or $500,000.
Careful, having a good idea here, Neil.
So at least there's the incentive there for the farmer to spend and invest, but also control something which is driving us mad. So, and the other thing, I remember when I was back in the Chamber of Commerce days in 2017, the Liberal government then, which was only 3 years old, was on this warpath against red tape. Everything was about red tape reduction. Everything was about making it easier to do business. I defy anyone to tell us that after 10 years of this government that it's actually got easier, or it's just got exponentially harder, I think.
If we were to look forward into 10 years, what would success look like, Nathan?
Success would look like less people ringing up TasFarmers complaining about deer and wallaby. That would be my first measure of success. Then, of course, things like spotlight surveys and aerial surveys of wallabies and deer relatively. You would hope to see those numbers drop. But as I said, the first measure of success would hopefully be less ammunition sales and less people ringing up complaining about it.
Well, just like deer, profitability ultimately comes down to whether farmers are being fairly rewarded for the risks and they're taking. Talking of the big risks, potatoes. It's a risky crop. You take on all the risk when you're growing them.
Yep.
Neil, where are things at with potatoes negotiations this year?
It's really interesting. So just to recap, processing potatoes, so across Simplot and McCain, it's worth post-factory probably about $1 billion, a little bit more than $1 billion a year to Tasmania. It's a massive industry, generates a lot of economic activity in our regions. There is substantial overseas pressure on imports that on the face of it compete against our Tasmanian product, but when you drill down into it more, our Tasmanian product is typically sold as a premium product, branded, either Edgel's, Bird's Eye or McCain or whatever it is, sold in supermarkets, quick serve restaurants, which are our fast food chains, and the food services, which is restaurants and
although
pubs and
nobody's quite sure where KFCs get there from.
Yeah, a lot of it is Australian grown.
It is,
but you can never empirically prove that. There's a huge amount of competition for the cheap French fries that are in the bottom of your local freezer. That's primarily in Australia driven by a overseas company called Farm Fritz, spelled F-R-I-T-E-S, so Farm Frites, which sometimes frightens the hell out of all of us, and Aldi. But had this joust with one of the processors last week, who spent a lot of time telling us how it's impacting Australian potato prices. But the product we produce, it doesn't really impact on us. So we are now at a point in the negotiations with both the processors, which are on very cordial terms, where we're very early in the cycle. We don't fully understand what price those processors are looking for. We very, very clearly understand the pressure that our local growers are under. So a lot of work's been done on gross margins and the cost of production. It looks like for those looking to plant potatoes for the season coming, so for the 26-27 year, that'll approach $25,000 a hectare. Most commercial, they're all commercial growers. The average grower of scale is probably planting 40 hectares. So they're $1 million on the hook for 22 weeks.
What else are the growers telling you about this year's upcoming season negotiations?
They're really worried about what the margin's going to be because, if we think about Simplot, and we spent a lot of time on Simplot last year, in 2025, the gross margin per hectare for the average yield was $8,000 a hectare. So if you manage to have a yield of 59 tonnes per hectare, your margin over and above your cost of production was $8,000 a hectare. And industry at that stage and farmers all accepted that was a good return, that it allowed for an accommodation of risk, and it is a risky crop, but also for reinvestment. And many farmers did invest. They bought harvesters, they bought tractors, they bought new ground, they invested in technology, expertise, but they also invested their family homes in this as well. The price cut from Simplot last year put that gross margin down to about $5,500. Even if the price stayed the same to the farmer this year, the increase in costs of production will bring that below $4,000. So farmers, as they weigh up the risk, so not just the return on the growing investment, but also the return on capital investment that's involved in growing potatoes. So you think about land, you think about infrastructure for irrigation, you think about tractors, harvesters, and on it goes. You might have for that 40 hectares upwards of, and Nathan, you know more about this than I, you might have $6 million invested in that, from the cost of that crop, your machinery, your farm, your irrigators, your contract with TI for the water, or whomever you get your water from. So for that $6 million investment, you probably want a bit more return on that investment than $4,000 a hectare. And this is where the rubber will hit the road, and this is why TasFarmers have really insisted on starting our negotiations early. So if we ratchet back, we were doing all this work in September and October last year. We're doing it now in June.
Too close to planting.
It was way too close to planting, and while we got, it wasn't a great outcome for farmers, but it was less bad than what was on the table. At least this time, if we come to a resolution on what the final offer will be from the processors in July, for example, growers can sit back and go, yeah, I can plant, or yes, or no, I won't. So it's, we've had some really good discussions with McCain. The McCain Growers Committee is working really hard on what a gross margin model looks like, but Simplot have reiterated that they don't want to stick to the gross margin model. They disappointingly weren't able to provide us with a price per tonne that they'd said they were at our last meeting. We'll meet with them again next week. There's a full growers committee meeting for Simplot on Thursday this week, and then we'll just keep moving along. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. It's probably a bit of a crossroad year for Tasmanian potato growers. Pardon me, because despite the tightening margins, it's still a great crop for Tasmania. But farmers need to make a decent return out of it and feel like they're valued by those overseas companies which are investing in Tasmania as well.
So timing, gross margins and input costs in terms of fuel, fertiliser, labour, etc. Is there anything else that's different about this year's negotiations?
Different? No. I mean, we're probably, the level of research and work that goes into preparing our case, I don't want to call it our case, but the information that we take into these meetings is probably deeper than I've ever experienced in my life before, and I've been around the block a few times. Like the amount of work we're doing, the amount of experts we're leaning on, the amount of intelligence we're getting from all sorts of different areas is reaping benefits, I think. But it's highly complicated. There's a powerful amount of work in the background, which means a few other things I should have been doing I haven't done yet. But I think growers can probably rest assured that we will go into these discussions with a full toolbox of things to use to get the best possible price and contract.
Nathan, you've grown potatoes before. How important would it be to have a price nice and early in the season?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. You want to be able to lock contractors in. You want to be able to lock the premium seed in. Be able to get your pick of the seed, and you can only do that early because otherwise everyone else gets it. You want to get fertiliser locked in at a good price and get your ground spray, get everything ready to go. And if you're waiting till September before you get any certainty on whether or not you're going to grow or make any money, you're running way too close to the wind. And it only takes a weather event, like we've had a couple of times in the last few years, where if you leave it too late and you get a weather event, you're into end of November and December before you get planted, and you get a yield reduction, we know, after the middle of November, every week after that you plant. One of the big things I think that we're up against here as Australian potato growers is we know that there's a lot of excess potatoes come out of Europe, and we know that there's a lot of subsidies that are available to farmers in Europe that we don't get, so that the playing field just doesn't feel right. It's something that we can be really proud of, that we're as efficient and as effective and as scaled up as we are with no subsidies. We do this organically. We grow our own businesses. We don't rely on the government, and we get the job done. And competing against subsidies, and we know they're winding those back in Europe, competing with subsidies makes it really difficult on the world stage. And I think Australian growers and the processors that are based in Australia do a fantastic job in actually working that environment.
Yeah, in Europe, they do things a little differently over there. There's the contracted yield. So Grayson, one of the, McCain might say to you in Belgium, Grayson, can you grow us 20,000 tonnes of potatoes? And they will not buy 1 gram more of potatoes from you for that $20,000, 20,000 tonnes. But you have to give them 20,000 tonnes whether you grow it or not. But what they do over there, they have what they call the spot market. So for your excess production, you can sell on the spot market. So it might be sold to someone who hasn't been able to grow enough for their contract. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is that there's just been massive overproduction, like 20, 30, 40%, to the point where the spot market in Europe is €0 per tonne. So they're giving them away if they can. Now there's a lot of contraction around planting of hectares and so on. But the processors are doing what processors do, and they're snaffling those low spot price tonnes and processing them because they just keep them going, because the factories over there are massive. They make what our 2 factories in Tasmania look like rounding errors in terms of production. A third of the world's frozen vegetables comes out of Belgium. Like, it is a hugely productive country. And then they also get that help from their government. Now, there's no subsidy on potatoes, but there's plenty of subsidies on the other crops they grow, which in turn helps the farm business, so that things that are amortised against potatoes here aren't in over there because they're effectively subsidised. So it's not a level playing field. However, in Australia, our market, our premium market where our French fries potato goes is immune to that, really. I mean, we'd like to see them increasing in price and all that sort of thing, that flowing back through to farmers, but we're not really comparing apples to apples. And I think we've only just realised that probably in the last month or so, when you really start to interrogate the numbers and the markets, which is a dividend of all this research we're doing in the background. So Europe is an issue. It's a benchmark and it does hold us back. And then you have the philosophy of someone like Simplot who's saying, well, they want a global price for potatoes, whether they're grown in Belgium, Netherlands, Tasmania, New Zealand, or wherever.
Yeah, I'm sure they take the carbon impact into that as well. You said the industry's worth $1 billion?
Yeah, about $1 billion.
Billion dollars. So broadly speaking, what does it mean to have a healthy processing sector in Tassie?
Oh, it's critical, absolutely critical. It's one of those industries where if, we're changing topics of a tack for a second, you look at the immense amount of government money that's going into the old smelting industries at the moment. So Tempco, Liberty Bell Bay, Near Star Zinc Works, and to a lesser extent, the Bell Bay aluminium smelter. If that money was used to support future industries, particularly those in agriculture, we would be in an incredibly better position around efficiencies of production and so on. I think someone pointed out the other day with the amount of money that federal and state governments had spent on propping up old smelting industries in Australia, we could have built a new multi-species abattoir in Tasmania.
There you go.
Yeah, lack of investment in this sector here. So what does the future look like within the next 6 months? What does a good outcome look like for getting a price done early? And
a good outcome. A good outcome will mean a fair return back to farmers, which means, we want to see an increase in the amount. We're not expecting, this to fund holiday homes at Bridport for potato growers. We just want to see a return to farmers which allows for them to keep reinvesting in this industry, which is really important for Tasmania. It's really important for Tasmania, not just for our farmers, but for our regional economies. It's really important for the dynamic of those communities as well.
Well, I think capital gains tax is killing the dream of a holiday home off pretty quickly. But Jono, talking of holiday homes and owning your own home in the near future.
Do you have a holiday home, John?
That's a long way away, Neil.
We've talked today.
Beau Morris for the weekend, eh?
We've talked about dairy effluent, deer management, potato pricing, but we like to go around the table and ask what's keeping everyone up. Jono, what's keeping you up, mate?
At the moment, Grayson, it's probably policy at the moment. We've got quite a lot of policies going through our committees and councils at the moment, and quad bikes and side-by-sides are probably at the top of that list, and farmers are having huge issues with quad bikes and trying to have access to them, and the market's just not there at the moment. And some are saying it's a bit of a market failure with the lack of good quad bikes that we can buy in Tasmania or just in Australia in general. So we're putting a fair bit of work in the background to try and get something up and running that supports the industry and makes it appropriate for what we're trying to do. But policy's on the tip of our tongue.
I can hear many farmers cheering about the quad bike situation and your efforts there, Jono. So good luck. Nathan Cox, what's keeping you up at night?
It's things that we didn't expect, and so we've had the CBOS issue that's just turned up out of nowhere, effectively. But we're always hearing about the bureaucracy here in Tasmania coming up with some other mad idea that's going to impinge on farmers' ability to farm. Not even talking about right to farm, I'm talking about ability to farm. So one we heard of recently was some suggestions that have been bounced around for a few years in relation to farmers being able to clear fence lines. So we know there's all sorts of issues with the Forest Practices Authority at the moment that needs to be reviewed, but suggestions feeding into the Forest Practices Authority, one of those suggestions is to prevent farmers from actually clearing fence lines, which makes no sense whatsoever. We need corridors for vermin fences. We need fire breaks. We need to be able to control our boundaries. And for some faceless bureaucrat to think up an idea like that just shows how out of touch our bureaucracies are. And what's keeping me up at night? What are they going to think of next?
We've been working in that space for a little while, Neil. But what's keeping you up? Are you developing more policies to get and feedback for the FPA inquiry?
Yeah, so Jasmine and Sarah and others are doing quite a bit of work on all that sort of thing. We've got a lot of policy and submission work going on at the moment. We're preparing a response around the proposed new Aboriginal Heritage Act in Tasmania. There's a few issues around, and I'll get the acronym wrong, but particularly around workplace safety and particularly on farms and around domestic and family violence. Just finished off a submission around that this morning. It's really important that we've got these continual flows of our views into government so that they're forming the right view and encouraging that. We're quite fortunate that we've got a good and proactive ag minister who goes into bat for us across a whole range of different levels, and long may that continue. I think the thing that keeps me up a lot at night is I just get a bit worried about farmers when there is about their mental health and well-being, when there is just such continual pressures. And as Nathan just said, you don't know what's next. Like, talking to John Williams up the northeast this morning, you wouldn't find a more switched on farmer than what JR is. He milks 650 dairy cows. He's got a good cropping potato production. They grow beef. They're into a little bit of forestry. They do all these things. And he sat down and rattled off all the things that he's got bureaucrats and council onto him about. And he said, I just don't know where it ends. He's got, two of his kids, want to be farmers. They'll be outstanding farmers. But they just sit back and think, what's the future? We're just getting regulated out of everything. That's what keeps me up at night, because our job here is to work out ways and strategise ways of trying to help farmers through that and encourage governments to not be so darn stupid and have actual sensible, practical policies and practicalities around all this sort of thing.
Well, talking of sensible, practical things and positive news, Nathan Cox, what's coming up this year?
FarmX. 20th of August. Going to be fantastic. Got a great lineup of speakers, a couple of absolute crackers.
Any hints?
Our Australia Day lamb guy might be on the
Might
agenda.
be making an appearance. That'd be exciting.
It makes sense.
It makes sense to have him on the card.
Absolutely. So early bird tickets are already up, aren't they, Grace?
Yes, but you're up until the end of the month, so you've got just under half the month to go before the end of the month. They'll be ticking over to full price, so I would recommend jumping on. I mean, it was a great lineup last year with Saul Eastlake and a number of other good speakers, Nathan, wasn't it?
It was. And so we're still looking for some sponsors. So businesses out there that want to show their support for agriculture and TasFarmers and everything that we're trying to do, feel free to get in touch with the office, talk to Grayson or Jess, and there's lots of things to sponsor.
Yeah, it was a big year last year, wasn't it, Jono? We had 200 young farmers. What was your takeaway from FarmX?
Just I think variation of the people that we got there and the amount of farmers we actually got in the room to listen to the speakers and the demonstrations, and I'm hoping people got something out of it. And the feedback we got back from our members was that it was a great day, so I encourage anyone to sign up for this year.
Yeah, there was a lot about technology, and this year we've even got, I think, halters coming along, and another numerous tech type people. Something that interests you and your farming, Nathan?
Oh, it's all interesting. It's all interesting, and it was really engaging last year. Lunch was great.
Lunch was good.
The speakers got a lot of compliments, but lunch got all the attention.
Thanks to Matson's Catering, who did a fantastic job, and our sponsors TQM.
Absolutely, and I believe they're back.
They're back. So I'm only going for the lunch. No, I'm sure there'll be some good speakers. Neil, what was your takeaways from FarmX?
It's the good thing about FarmX, which really highlighted to me last year, is that farmers do like to connect with one another. So
it was good for that. It
was an opportunity to hear new ideas, see new gear, but catch up with a lot of people and talk stuff through. Like, at the busy time of year, farmers are busily doing that, just farming and trying to get their nose to the ground and get things done. But just seeing bunches of farmers just standing around talking about farming, talking about new stuff, talking about how they're going, that's just that people element, I think is almost priceless. I mean, you see it a bit at AgFest, but AgFest is more, it's a farming event, but nothing matches, I think, the vibe that comes out of FarmX, because it's really pointed at that real pointy end of agriculture and the people in agriculture, and more particularly it's around talking about ideas where agriculture can go next.
Yeah, it is. It is about those discussions and those conversations and the new ideas. Well, I'd like to thank our guests. Jono, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Grayson. Appreciate it.
Mr. Cox, Mr. President, fantastic as always.
Thanks, mate.
And Neil.
Thanks, Grace. And I looked at the run sheet and it's got Nathan X, and I thought, oh, there you go.
Yes, just to remind me, he's special. Fishing book. Where can I get it?
Well, in all good bookstores, hopefully starting from next week. So I'm hoping it's on a pallet and on its way from Melbourne today or tomorrow.
And a special thank you to our members who without it just wouldn't happen. We couldn't stop the overrun of red tape and other government ideas. To our sponsors, The Hub, Telstra, TasBuilt. It doesn't happen without you either and your support for agriculture. Thanks for joining us on Tas Talks, and we'll talk in a fortnight.
Thanks, Grayson.